Okay, good afternoon. We've made it to another week. I hope that you spent some time practicing on the baritone, the D notes and the D chords. We're going to move on to the second string this week. And if you're playing on a tenor, this lesson is mostly for people that are playing the baritone, but it translates to the tenor. We're talking the C string with the tenor, so C string and C chords. So you'll have to keep in mind whenever I say G, for you it's a C. Whenever I say D, for you it's a G, if you're playing tenor. Not a lot of information, not as much for baritone, so that's why we stick with baritones mostly. And I hope that by the end of this lesson you start to see what we're trying to do, and that's to make you a very versatile ukulele player where you can utilize a lot of the neck and not just be stuck up here. The goal is to teach you to be able to play the ukulele, to write your own songs, to let your creative juices flow right out of you through this beautiful instrument into the world. And a lot of it, we got to get out of here. This is Main Street, wherever you live. This is like your hometown. We're going to venture out into the world, this big fretboard of amazement, and we're gonna learn some good stuff. Okay, so last week we learned the D's, open, 12 on the top string, 7 on the second string, 3 on the, we're doing a recap, 3 on the third string, 3rd fret, and then 10 on the bottom string. And the chords associated with that are these shapes. Beautiful. Those were the D chords. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to be using the same chord formations that we used on the D's, and we're just going to move them to a different place and play the exact same formations, but we're going to be playing a different chord because we're in a different place on the neck. How amazing is that you learn these chords and now you'll be able to move them all over the place and play different chords. It's going to make you a versatile musician. All right. And oh, by the way, I have a Facebook page called Baritone. I'll put the link in the description. And if you want to join up there, I put some close-up pictures of what these chord formations look like so you can see them. And you could even ask me some questions if you wanted to over there. Okay, so let's get to the second string. The second string is G. If you hit it with nothing else right there, and remember for you tenors and other folks, it's a C. But for us baritones, G. So open is G, and 12th fret is G, okay? Just like the open D on the top and 12D on the top is the same note. Open G on the second string. Let's find our other G's on the fretboard in the first 12 frets. So top string, 5th fret is a G2, and tonally it's the same as the open second string. They sound the same. So G, G on the 5th fret. Then we got 12th fret, 2nd string, open 2nd string, and then we go to the 10th fret, or the 8th fret rather, on the 3rd string, and we have another G. And then on the bottom string, it's the 3rd fret. So 3rd fret, 8th fret, 12th fret, open, and then to the 5th fret. Again, do this exercise where you kind of a little musical ensemble there. So that was us playing the G. So practice theirs, remember, goes 5th fret on the top, 12 and open, 8th fret, and then that 12th is right. tonally the same. They're the same pitch. And then the one on the third fret on the bottom, it's also tonally the same pitch. And then you have 5 on the top and open on the second. Okay, so now practice those for a little bit. Good. Now what we want to do is we want to combine. We're making a musical sandwich. We got the bread, which is the D's, and our G's are going to be some sort of processed meat. G could be ground beef. Anyway, it's the meat. It's a dry sandwich. We just have bread and meat. The D's and the G's. Then we're gonna intermix them. So remember, on the top string, open was D, and then the 5th fret is G. Now we're gonna go to the 12th fret, which is another D on the top string, and we're gonna drop right down to the 12th fret on the second, and that's one of our G's. And then remember, the 7th fret on the second string is a D. And then open gives us another G. And then on the next string, it's 3rd fret for a D. And then 8th fret for the next G. And then 10th on the bottom is one of our D's. And then 3rd fret, bottom string is a G. So go ahead. Going to the 8th. Next we're going to the 3rd fret. Then open. That's a G. Now 7th fret. That's a D. Now 12th fret. That's a G. 12th fret top string. That's a D. And then 5th fret. That's a G. And then open. That's a D. So spend some time intermixing them together so that you're starting to learn the fretboard. You're learning a lot here. You're learning where your D's and G's are. So pretty soon, you just know where everything's at. Now we're going to get back into the chords. And the reason the chords are so important is if you know where these notes are on the fretboard, you know which chord formation to use for that note. Take, for example, we have the D on the bottom string on the 10th fret. And remember, that's our chord. So when we're playing a chord and we're playing this formation with the root on the bottom string, and it's also right here on the 7th fret on the second. So it's on the second and the bottom string. That's a D there on the 7th, and that's a D there on the 10th. Whenever we know wherever these notes are at, that's the chord we're going to make. So because we're playing this chord formation here, we know we're playing a D chord. We can just use our pinky as an example. So now we can just move the whole thing up until we get our pinky on the G, which is on the 3rd fret. And we don't have a fret here, so we would just play all of these open. But you can see I got my finger here as if this was a fret. But this is the same chord formation. It's just moved up to where now my pinky is on the G, and this second string is also the G open. So using the same chord formation, go back to 10. We know how to play a D now. To G. Isn't that neat? Now we know how to play a G and a D. Yeah, they're a ways apart. It's quite a bit of a slide, but if you want to make, this grand move where everybody's like, what did he just do? He moved way up the neck. You But that's just demonstrating to you the same chord formation makes different chords based on where you put your hand on the fretboard. And remember, wherever your pinky's at on that bottom string, whatever note that is, in this case it's the G note, you'll be making the G chord. I hope you understand this. If you have questions, ask me. Another one of the chords that we learned last week was this one here. And this was a D note. Now we're going with whatever on the second to the bottom string down here, which is the 3rd fret on this string. That's the D note. Remember, we learned on this fret, that's the D note. So if you make this chord formation where I have my 1 on the 2nd, my 2 on the 2nd string on the 3rd fret, and then my index finger on the 2nd fret on the G string, which we learned earlier. It's on this. That's a D chord. Now let's slide this whole thing up until we get to the G note, which we just learned is on the 8th fret. So we're going to slide this whole thing up right to there. Now you can't play the top string, so just kind of mute it with your thumb. But this is the G chord, and the reason it's the G chord is where our finger is on the root on that 8th fret on the second from the bottom string. Back to D. Pretty neat there. Now we know how to play G and D there and there. Isn't that pretty cool? The other way that we learned to play a D chord was utilizing that same 3rd fret on the second to the last string for our D, and then we cover the bottom string and the 3rd string, the G string. We bar across that, so I'm covering these two on the 2nd fret. I'm covering these two, playing the D note, and then I got my top on the top string. I'm covering the 4th fret. That's another way to play. Instead of playing it like this, we're getting a different sound by playing it like that. Now, go ahead and we'll move that whole thing up. Remember, we're going to move this up until we got this finger on the second to the last string on the G note, which we learned again was on the 8th fret. Now we got a G chord. Move it back down. Back up to G. So now we've learned how to play G's and D's 3 different ways. Now this G is the one where you have to mute that top string, and then this way it's a pretty similar chord, but this way you can play all of them. So look at G, there's a D, D, it's D, D, and then we learned this D, 3 Ds, now we know 3 Gs. Let's throw one more in there to give us a lot of real good variety. And the last one that we learned last week was up here on the 10th, and this is using that bottom string root to be able to identify the chord. So remember, as we learned last week, the 10th fret on the bottom string is D, and this is where we covered the first 2 on the 10th fret, the first 2 strings. I usually just bar it. Then the 11th fret on the 3rd string up, and then on the top string, which is also a D. Remember, we learned this top string D, 12th fret is a D. That's another chord. And we identify it as a D chord because of this is our identifier, this 10th fret. And also the top string, they're both Ds. So that's what makes it a D chord. There's other reasons behind it, but for simplification, that's how we're going to say it. Now, how would we find the G? Well, we learned that the G on the bottom string is on the 3rd fret, and it's also on the top string on the 5th fret. So we just move the same chord formation down here, and we have another G. So I know know there's a lot of information here. These are things that if you just get over this hump and you apply yourself and you get your mind wrapped around it, you're just going to be able, in short time, be able to play a lot of chords all over the fretboard. Just take, for instance, if I wanted to play this D, and then my song went to here, I could just play that formation of G, or I could play this one and then just switch to this G. And then I could go to this D, this other D to this G, and that one's a nice one. And then this is a D. There's a D. Here's a G. Here's a D, here's a G, here's a D the same way, and here's a G. So by learning where your notes are at, you can tie chords in with those notes and those locations, and we've only used 4 different chord formations, positions for our hand, and we've learned those 4 formations will make chords all over. We've learned 8 chords. We've learned 4 Ds and 4 Gs, and we're going to learn even more using those exact chord formations. So you're really only with your hands learning 4 ways to make a chord, and you're going to be able to make chords all over the place. So remember the G's, quick recap, bottom string is on 3. The next string up, it's on the 8th fret, that's G. And then 12th fret on the G string. The reason I'm calling this the G string is because whatever it is when you play it open, that's how you identify the string. So playing it without touching anything, it's a G note, so we call it the G string. Favorite of swimsuit models all over the world. And then we call the D, of course, because it rings open D. Okay, so now you know your D's and your G's, and you know some good chords for D's and G's. So play around, take some time, you know, and you don't have to be so uptight that you got to wear a turtleneck sweater and I gotta have my fingers perfect. It'll come. Play it like garbage. Play it like garbage. Play through the garbage, and pretty soon you'll start sounding better more than you sound worse. And that, you know, it's the pursuit of every musician, is to just try to keep sounding better. There's things that I play now that my fingers aren't accustomed to, and it's like I'm learning all over again. But it gets quicker and easier. Okay, so friend me up on Baritone on Facebook. It's open to the public, and ask me questions. And I hope that you really enjoy this and embrace learning how to play the ukulele. And this is just gonna explode into so much good stuff, and you'll be able to start writing your own music soon. And that's the goal, is to be able to make whatever music's inside of you come out, and have an instrument to be able to do that with. And the Baritone ukulele is a great one for it. So have a good week, and I'll see you next week with the next string. I wonder what it's called. It can't get much better than the G string, we know that, but it'll be pretty dang good. All right, have a good week.